Today, we are covering 7 major developments that are reshaping the geopolitical landscape as of April 3, 2026. First, Trump states that the United States can take Iran's oil. Second, vessels from Oman, France, and Japan transit the Strait of Hormuz. Third, Trump threatens Iran's civilian infrastructure, warning that bridges and power plants are next. Fourth, the United Nations Security Council prepares to vote on a plan to reopen the Strait of Hormuz amid deep divisions. Fifth, the United States reportedly proposed a 48-hour ceasefire with Tehran on April 2nd. Sixth, Trump says a downed American aircraft will not affect negotiations with Iran. Seventh, Egypt, once Russia's largest buyer of stolen grain, now pledges to buy Ukrainian wheat. The war that was supposed to last 4 to 6 weeks has just entered its 6th week, and the situation is anything but resolved. On Friday, Donald Trump took to his Truth Social platform and wrote words that stunned analysts, legal experts, and foreign governments alike. With a little more time, we can easily open the Strait of Hormuz, take the oil, and make a fortune. Read that again. The sitting President of the United States publicly declared his intention to seize the natural resources of a sovereign nation currently at war with American forces. And then, as if to make sure no one missed the point, he followed it up with a second post that simply read, "Does anyone want the oil?" This is not a minor rhetorical slip. This is a fundamental challenge to the international legal order. Under the doctrine of permanent sovereignty over natural resources, adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1962, the oil and minerals of any country belong to that country, full stop. Trump has floated this same idea regarding Iraq and Venezuela before, but saying it openly while bombs are still falling on Iranian soil is something else entirely. It signals that the war's objectives may be shifting from regime change to outright resource extraction, and that timeline pressure is building inside the White House. Trump himself admitted the tension. They want it to end. If we stayed there, I would rather just take the oil. We could do that so easily. But the people in the country kind of say, just win. That is a president caught between his own imperial instincts and a domestic public that wants the war wrapped up, not extended indefinitely. And here is what makes that tension so explosive. The Pentagon, according to reporting from Politico, is running out of strategically significant targets to strike inside Iran. 5 weeks of sustained bombardment by the most powerful air force on Earth, and the target list is thinning. Yet Tehran has not collapsed. The Iranian government has survived the assassination of several of its top officials, including Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who was killed in the opening strikes of February 28th. The system has not fallen. The Strait of Hormuz remains closed. Iranian drones and missiles continue to strike Israel, Jordan, Iraq, and Gulf, states hosting American military installations. And now, a report from the semi-official Fars news agency reveals that the United States proposed a 48-hour ceasefire through a third country on April 2nd, just 1 day before these statements. Iran did not respond in writing. It responded on the battlefield, continuing its attacks. The proposed ceasefire came, according to Fars, after American forces came under increasing pressure in the region, including a reported strike on a U.S. military depot on Bubiyan Island in Kuwait. The Americans, it appears, are probing for an exit, even while publicly projecting dominance. That is a contradiction the White House cannot maintain forever. On Thursday night, Trump escalated verbally in a direction that alarmed international law experts. He posted on Truth Social, "Our armed forces, the greatest and most powerful by far in the world, haven't even started to destroy what is left in Iran. Bridges next, electric power plants. The new regime leadership knows what needs to be done, and it needs to be done fast." Earlier that same morning, he had shared video of a major Iranian bridge being destroyed in an airstrike, captioning it with celebration. Legal scholars were unambiguous in their response. Attacking civilian infrastructure, including bridges, power plants, and water desalination facilities, constitutes collective punishment and is prohibited under the 1949 Geneva Conventions. Iran's Foreign Ministry spokesman Esmail Baghaei compared the bridge strike to tactics used by ISIS, calling it a war crime. Whatever one thinks of the Iranian government, the deliberate destruction of infrastructure that civilians depend on for survival is a line with consequences that extend far beyond this conflict. Even as Trump threatened more destruction, something quietly significant happened in the waters of the Persian Gulf. A French container ship, the Kribi, flagged in Malta and owned by French shipping giant CMA-CGM, crossed the Strait of Hormuz on April 2nd. It is the first Western-linked vessel known to have made that transit since Iran effectively closed the waterway. Data from Lloyd's List Intelligence shows that only around 150 vessels have passed through the strait since March 1st, the vast majority linked to Iran, China, India, and Pakistan. The Kribi reportedly changed its listed destination to owner France before entering Iranian territorial waters, signaling its nationality to Iranian authorities, and then went dark on AIS tracking systems during the crossing. 3 Omani-linked tankers and a Japanese LNG carrier operated by Mitsui OSK Lines also made the transit, with Japan's vessel being the first LNG carrier and the first Japan-linked ship to pass through since the conflict began. China expressed gratitude earlier this week after 3 of its vessels crossed, including 2 container ships belonging to state-owned COSCO. What this tells us is that Iran is allowing selective passage based on national affiliation, using the strait as a geopolitical instrument with surgical precision rather than a blunt total blockade. That is a more sophisticated strategy than simply closing the waterway to everyone, and it puts enormous pressure on the United States and its allies who remain locked out while competitors move goods freely. That pressure is now landing at the United Nations. The Security Council is expected to vote on April 4th on a revised resolution aimed at restoring commercial navigation through the Strait of Hormuz. The original draft, presented by Bahrain, included language authorizing member states to use all necessary means to ensure the waterway's safety. That language was blocked by China, Russia, and France, forcing a revision. The updated text now permits only defensive measures, a significant dilution that represents a compromise designed to prevent a veto while still providing some framework for a coordinated response. China's ambassador Fu Kong made Beijing's position clear, warning that any military authorization would inevitably lead to further escalation and serious consequences. Russia's ambassador Vasily Nebenzia said the proposal simply does not solve the problem. France signaled openness to the revised language. The divide at the Security Council reflects the broader fracture in the international response to this conflict, with the United States and its close allies on one side, and China and Russia, who have clear economic and strategic interests in a prolonged American entanglement in the Gulf, on the other. Meanwhile, a separate front in the global geopolitical contest opened this week with a striking diplomatic reversal involving Egypt and grain. Russia has been systematically harvesting wheat from occupied Ukrainian territories and exporting it through ports it controls, including Sevastopol in Crimea, using ship-to-ship transfers to obscure the origin of the grain and evade Western sanctions. Egypt had been Russia's single largest buyer of this grain, purchasing an estimated 7.6 million tons in the current season, making Cairo a critical node in Moscow's sanctions evasion network. On April 3rd, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that after a phone call with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, Egypt has pledged to stop accepting Russian grain exported from occupied Ukrainian territories and to increase imports of Ukrainian wheat instead. The timing is extraordinary. Just one day before this announcement, Vladimir Putin had met with Egyptian officials and proposed that Egypt serve as a strategic hub for Russian energy and commodities destined for Africa and the Middle East, essentially inviting Cairo to deepen its role in Russia's sanctions evasion infrastructure. Egypt listened to Putin's proposal and then, within 24 hours, took Zelensky's call and moved in the opposite direction. This is not a coincidence. Egypt is reading the geopolitical winds and hedging its bets, and the fact that it chose this moment to distance itself from Russian grain tells you something about where Cairo sees the balance of power heading. The implications of the Egyptian pivot extend well beyond agriculture. Other countries, including Bangladesh, Lebanon, Turkey, Syria, Saudi Arabia, and several Balkan nations, have also been receiving Ukrainian grain under Russian control. If Egypt's move triggers a broader reassessment among these buyers, Russia loses not just a market but a critical mechanism for monetizing its occupation of Ukrainian land. And Ukraine gains access to one of the highest demand food import markets in North Africa at a moment when it desperately needs both revenue and diplomatic leverage. Step back and look at all of this together, and what you see is a war and a geopolitical crisis that are simultaneously expanding and straining. The United States is 6 weeks into a conflict it predicted would last a month, running low on targets, losing aircraft, and now quietly floating ceasefire proposals while publicly threatening to seize Iranian oil fields. Iran is battered but functional, blocking the world's most important oil transit choke point with enough tactical sophistication to let Chinese and Omani ships through while keeping American-aligned vessels out. The Security Council is paralyzed by great power competition. Egypt is quietly repositioning away from Moscow. And somewhere in the Persian Gulf, a French container ship crossed a strait that was supposed to be closed, its AIS tracker going dark for just long enough to suggest that the rules governing this conflict are being written in real time by whoever dares to test them. The question now is whether any party in this crisis has both the leverage and the will to bring it to a close before the economic damage becomes irreversible, and before the legal lines being crossed become the new normal for how powerful states conduct war. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think the endgame looks like here, and who comes out of this with the most to show for it?